Maui's Wayanapa State Park on the eastern side of the island is a truly magnificent place. Its remote, wild, volcanic coastline is a place of solitude and respite from everything upbeat, overrun, and overpriced. The black sand of the Pa'iloa beach that is nestled within a 120-acre park is unlike anything we might see here on the continental United States. Signs of the impacts of nature on herself are everywhere. It's clear that the people who have made Maui home for generations have done as much as they possibly can to preserve the beauty and power of the land and the water there. It's a testament to what has been lost here, actually, and what can be found when we care for the land as much as we endeavor to care for ourselves. I was lucky. Because of the power of mutual relationships and skills honed over years, I was offered an opportunity to visit the state of Hawaii for 2 months over the summer of 2022 and serve as the First Unitarian Church of Honolulu's summer minister. And as a last hope to care for myself after an intensely busy and life-changing period of ministry, I made the trek from Oahu to Maui to travel the road to Hana, a pretty desolate 60-mile drive with over 600 hairpin turns, culminating in a visit to the state park and Pa'iloa Beach. It was a very long drive, with a few not-so-fun leg cramps, and a lot of time to think. One of the first things I spotted once I made the journey down the cliffs to the beach was an opening. Not a comfortable one for me. It was just big enough for me to fit my body into it, but I had to bend down and contort myself a bit to make my way through it. Once inside and able to get comfortable in my body again, I realized I was in a small lava tube that sat right at the shoreline of the beach. Black rocks wide enough to sit on and black sand everywhere. You can see it in the image behind me. All as a result of lava flows hundreds of years before. And an opening to the ocean let the Pacific in, all the way in. Waves crashing and settling right at my feet. I'm not gonna lie to you, it was scary. It was. I'm not a swimmer, you see. So those classes that I took 30-some years ago, without a lot of access to pools and large bodies of water in my everyday life, which is an entirely different sermon that I will not give today, those classes don't mean very much to me anymore. And so the idea that I was even in this tiny little space with water, lots of water, coming in and out, made me question my choices. Why on earth would I want to do this? Exactly. Why would I want to be here for any amount of time? It's pretty and everything. It's beautiful. And it matters to me that I honor the land that I'm living in and near. But it seems dangerous. A large swell could fill this little cave with water at any moment, and I'd be left, honestly, with very few options to protect myself beyond trusting my body and my mind to do what they need to do to get me out. Before I knew it, I was already in a space of worry and regret. My moment in that cave is actually not a far cry from where we sometimes find ourselves as people of faith and good conscience in sticky situations. When we know there could be consequences for faithful action, something told me to go down there. And I did it. When we are stuck between the silence that we may be used to and the naming of hard things with people we love. Thank you for that story. When we are faced with the choice to run from or stay in the discomfort for the sake of relationship, for covenant, or for Unitarian Universalism that in its truest and best form is more often messy and hard to nail down than not. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. Yes, I heard that. I really heard that. Thank you. I'm reminded of moments I hear about all the time, of folks coming to our congregations because of our principles, because of the words that we use often, but then have the hardest time living into. Right? Sometimes more often than we want. Right? Because those words resonate in people's bodies and in their souls, and they show up and then find themselves surprised. And as a minister, I end up sitting with folks through these moments a lot. The aftermath of these moments, right? Where folks find themselves surprised by ageism or racism or transphobia or classism in these spaces that are supposed to be so safe and so good and so perfect. So surprised that they're not sure how to move through. In those moments, we're often being asked to listen more deeply and to trust. Called even. I actually don't believe that ministers are the only people called on this earth. I think we all are. Called even into deep listening and deep trust. Deep listening is an act of surrender because we risk being changed by what we hear, says Valerie Kaur in her book, See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto on revolutionary love. In the context of engaging with other people, Kaur even talks here about quieting her own thoughts so she can listen to others with all of her available senses. Deep listening. What would happen? What would happen if we did that more often for ourselves? What would happen if we paused in any given situation, whatever it is, re-entered the moment in the fullness of our bodies, listening to all that makes us who we are, and listening to all about how we receive that input? It may or may not mean slowing down in the moment, but it absolutely means being intentional and attentive enough to not get lost in what our brains suggest is the one and only way to move through. I appreciated your story, Kate, about thinking, well, I must be a bad person. But you did that. You took a step. Wait a minute. This might not be the only way to think about this. In that cave, I was reminded of a book I'd been reading off and on over the previous months called Undrowned. Undrowned, Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals. It's an incredible book. It's an incredible book, Undrowned, Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals, by a poet and author named Alexis Pauline Gumbs, who is a remarkable human being and a beautiful writer. In it, she offers these words about surrender, which is what I believe these moments call for. And what happens if we just let go? Like dolphins who beach themselves on shore to eat and trust the tide to bring them back into the water. Or who time their birth cycles to seasonal floods. or migrate across the world following warm currents on a menopausal planet? What would it take to tune in with our environment enough to be in flow with the earth, with what grounds us most deeply, instead of in struggle against it? What would it take to be in tune with our environment enough to be in flow with it, instead of in struggle against it? See, all of the work that we do requires being fully present in body, mind, and spirit. It makes surrender possible. When we are fully aware of what's happening in here, it allows us to say, wait a second. When there's surrender, there's vulnerability, which is hard for a lot of us. Am I right? Vulnerability is hard. And when vulnerability is present, trust isn't too far behind. As I began to reflect on the immediacy of my worry and lack of trust, and Alexis's hopes for our surrender in her incredible book, I noticed my body start to settle into that moment. My breathing slowed. I started listening to the water and the sounds the waves made at different points of contact with the rocks and the walls of the lava tube. I was finally able to sit down and rest. How many of us have a hard time resting? See, I knew about some of y'all. I sat on one of those rocks for a long time, reading and even writing a bit in my journal, watching the water and feeling the waves as they ebbed and flowed. Truthfully, it was a lot. It was a lot to take in, but it was okay that it turned out to be simultaneously tranquil and still a little bit terrifying. But my body helped me settle into that which was terrifying about it, so that mostly it was tranquil. I knew who I was in the moment, and I could just be. In my life as a minister and a facilitator of culture shift work, I get to journey with folks through those scary places that many of us find ourselves in all the time as we do the work of belonging and meaning making in all the places we endeavor to call home, including our congregations. Whether it's where we live, work, or go to church, we are often confronted with a situation that we can become immediately skeptical of, mostly because we've never encountered that situation before and aren't sure what the right way is, or we know full well what to expect because it's what we're used to getting from the people we're around and the places we're in. I'm reminded of what I tell people all the time in that work, and apparently what I needed to recall for myself that afternoon sitting on Black Rock at the water's edge. What matters most, friends, is our presence. Our presence. Can you say that word with me? Presence. Presence, especially in the uncertainty. To let go of what we think we know or what we're certain we don't understand. And be open to what's possible when all the elements come together to give us an opportunity to be made better by the experience. In the moments we can't quite wrap our heads and hearts around, it's not easy to remain present. It's not. Our minds start to race, like mine did that day, like Kate's did in that moment, right? Whether it's a moment of uncertainty, change, or conflict, the tightness of mistrust is often the first thing we feel. And sometimes it is for good reason. And it doesn't have to be the last. Being confronted by the intensity of these moments brings a real part of living in the world and a necessary aspect of growing in our Unitarian Universalism. In this faith where we are all supposed to have the space to show up fully as ourselves and all show up with differing needs and hopes for our individual and collective growth and liberation, we are not all the same, friends. Intense moments are bound to happen. But trust and deep listening are a good way to help us move through. Admittedly, it took me a minute. But thank the gods for Alexis, who helped remind me that just because I've not had as much access to water as I'd have liked over the years, it didn't mean that I'm not deeply connected to it. With the help of community and remembrance, I got to rediscover some things about myself that day. And now I get to hold on to what I found and have it with me whenever I need it. I got that much closer to the highest expression of my existence in that moment. What helps you get closer to the highest expression of yours? Do you know? Perhaps it is worth consideration. My hope for all of us, is that we can recall when it matters most, what opens us up to life and possibility, so that we might, repeat after me, release all that we hold, and flow, Amen. Ashe, and blessed be.